All right, everybody, I'll get going here. My name is David Bergman. I've been doing Christmas lights since like 2017, an animated Christmas light show. And so I'll just get going here with my Christmas wireframes. All right. So, like I said, I'm David Bergman, so Christmas wireframes, I started getting going on this because of I was looking online to try and buy myself a set of wireframes, and they were all back ordered, like a year in advance. And I wanted one that year, so I went about trying to make my own. Okay. And so today I'm going to kind of walk through my whole process of making a wireframe. So I started my show in 2017. You see a picture here with one of our local police officers. He comes by every year to come visit our show. And he goes out and he shakes hands with all the people watching it. So it's actually great fun. And actually, one year we had a lot of ice on our road. It was really bad to have snowplows had to come through. And next morning, the sand truck came down to make it a little safer for everybody watching our show. So I have over 25,000 pixels. I have all kinds of different P5 panels that I built. You see in the back corner there my large 6 by 3.5 foot panel that I built, as well as you see a bunch of the wireframes there, like the Santa and the reindeer that I built. I am an engineer, but I'll tell you is that you don't need to be an engineer to enjoy this hobby. We got, I mean, there's people I've helped. I've helped probably a half a dozen people get started with animated shows here locally, and they come for all backgrounds. I mean, you just have to have a desire to learn. All right, here's a couple, focusing on some of them that I've built. You can see that I have the Toy Story crew here, Buzz, Woody, and Rex. Rex, I put a Santa hat on him there. And then I have a train in the upper right-hand corner. That was one of my first major projects for a wireframe, and you will see that I put P5 panels in the window. The train engine has 4 panels, uh, P5 panels, and same thing with the middle car. And then there's individual ones on the caboose at the end. It's kind of hard to see the caboose there, but there it is right there. And then the Santa and the reindeer. All right, next slide. All right, and here I have Olaf that I built. I actually have a YouTube video on my process, and he actually sings. I'll click the little. I don't know if you can hear that, but you can see that he just talks to it. I just animated all that in X-Lights. All right, how did I get started? Looked at purchasing wireframes, but most suppliers are backlogged a year or more. Knew I needed something strong since I have a lot of strong winds where I live. I mean, I'll get 60-mile-an-hour gust every year, so I may over-engineer things, make sure things stay up. I haven't lost anything to wind yet. I'll take that back. Was it a year ago? I had a garbage can get blown into the back of my train and knock it over. So I had to go do a little bit of repairs to get that thing back up that night. And I decided I just went and bought myself a cheap Harbor Freight welder. Cost me what, $100. That's all it costs. Okay. So and I'm not a very artistic, so I can't draw. So I go to the internet for help. All right, so here I'll just kind of walk through Olaf here and what I did there. So you got to decide a theme. What do you want? What kind of character are you looking for? All right, you want a Christmas train? You want a Santa Claus? I mean, what is it you're looking for? And I found that kids' coloring pages are fantastic for making a Christmas wireframe. They're actually the best, they're simple drawings. And so what I do is I print this image out. Now, I don't have a great big huge plotter. So what I do is I go to Adobe and I make a poster. So I just the Adobe program, I click on the poster button as you see right here on my slide. All right. And then the next thing you do is you scale it up. Now, on this particular case, I went up to 600%, and I tell it to put cut marks on there. All right, so what I am going to end up doing is I'm going to end up pasting or taping these together. All right, so what I do is I print this out. You can see here it's 68 by 77 inches, and each one of these cut marks, each one of these marks is an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So I just take the whole thing, I lay it out, and I tape it all together. So it uses quite a bit of paper. I mean, you could also go print this out on, I would take it to a print shop and have them print you a large sheet of it. All right, so this becomes my pattern for cutting my wire. All right, so what are the tools you need? Like I said, you need access to a printer. 1/4-inch steel rod is the best that I found for wireframes. You get enough of them. They're relatively strong. They may be a little bit flexible. So if you get a really big one, you might want to go up to 3/8-inch steel rod. And don't go buy it at Home Depot, guys, or your big box store. You're going to spend way too much money. Go find a steel supplier. You can even go to a local fab shop. I got a small fab shop here in town that I call them up and they'll sell me steel. All right. So, but there's also a supplier called Pacific Steel in my local area that I go to that I buy all my steel from. All right. So, what I have a vise, bolt cutters, obviously the welding machine I'm using, flux core. It's the simplest to get started with. You don't have gas. You just get the wire, and you start cutting. You get an angle grinder and a wire bender. Okay, so all of these are here. This particular one on the middle right, that came from Harbor Freight, and it's just a roller, so you could roll circles with it. All right, and then this upper one I use to bend different shapes of my rods. Okay. All right, and so what I end up doing is I cut my steel to length, right? And lay it, I bend it, and I keep laying it on my pattern. I have it laying on top of my workbench, and I lay out all the steel. So, if you can do longer pieces and do more bends, it'll save you time in welding. Uh, as you cut your steel, you can do lots of little pieces and you do lots of welding, but if you can take a long one and do a long sweeping and do a couple bends with it using the roller or the benders, or even just put in your vise and adjusting its angle by hand. And the 1/4-inch rod is really easy to do that with. There's lots of trial and error. You bend it too far, go back, take it back to your vise, bend it back. All right. And so here you'll see here on this particular photo where you start to take shape, right? And what I'll do when I get ready to go weld it, once I got all the wire cut, is I'll take just a sheet of paper and I'll take a Sharpie and I'll mark out the joint where I'm going to weld it. And then what I do is I take it to my welding table and I lay that steel on the table. And I use that piece of paper to actually match it in place so the steel's in the right orientation. And I'll mount that down with some magnets, okay, some welding magnets. And then what I'll do is I'll do the weld. All right. And again, flux core is easy to start with. If you did MIG, you'll have some gas bottles. One of the disadvantages of flux core, there's a lot of spatter and you have more cleanup to go do. But for our wireframes, it's really, what are you going to do is you're going to cut it, you'll clean it up a bit, and you're going to paint it. And people aren't really looking at the quality of your weld so much as they're looking at your overall character from a distance with the lights on it. So it doesn't have to be perfect. All right, so here's a picture here with the welding magnets on my welding table, locked in place with a piece of paper. Once you get it set in place, you can try to slide that paper out. So before you do your welding. So, I mean, if you did it right here, if you weld it with the paper on, the paper is actually going to burn. But you're better off taking it off. I've done it with it there at times. All right. Oops. Am I getting too far ahead of myself? All right. So I just repeat the process over and over again till you get your completed wireframe. And what I did on this one is you'll see the wireframe, the coloring picture I had of Olaf had a great big huge mouth. So instead of leaving it blank, I put a bunch of different shapes in there to make the various different singing faces. So what I did is I went over to X Lights and put one of the stock characters in it and got the shapes of the various different phenomes in X Lights. And then I repeated those here with these various shapes. Like you see, I have a circle in the center for when he's doing oh, hello. And so I got all those shapes built into it. And then after you've done welding them and cleaning them up, you go paint it. I paint them black. That way the lights, it's not affected by lights. You could do white, whatever color you want. There really isn't a huge difference there. All right. So now adding the lights. You have several options here. The old classic wireframes, people will put just regular lights on them, and you can actually go buy covers that you put on your lights. So that will put the various colors. So if you have Santa and you want his beard to be white and you want his hat to be red, you can put these actual covers on the lights. But what I do is I use pixels because I animate that in my show. And I'll set up submodels and I can change the color with each pixel. And so I can just have them sitting there static, or I can actually have various effects go across it. All right. I just realized my video wasn't on, so I just did that here. All right. So when you add the lights, I mean, I use cable ties. They're cheap, they're easy. And I put 2 per light. You can also go get these pixel clips, wizardofwire.com. You can get clips there, and you can clip that to 1/4 inch rod, and you can clip your lights right on there for pixels or for standard lights. And so, all right, so the color caps you can get at christmasleds.com if you're looking to use the standard lights on them. All right. With pixels, you may need to consider power balancing or power injection, depending on how many lights you have. Olaf has some 400 lights on it, so and they're 12-volt pixels, so I did power balancing. I have power on the front end and the back end of it, and therefore there's power for like 200 each per output. All right. So next thing is setting up an X Lights. You'll need to create a custom model. So you take a picture of your prop with the lights on, is what I do. Okay. And there are several methods to create your custom models. There's examples on YouTube. You can use X Lights. This is a native custom model builder, and Light Show Hub custom model builder is my preferred method. This is a website that David Peace created, and I'll show you how that works here. So if you go to the custom model builder website, the first thing you do is you import an image. So you just grab a file off your computer and load her in. All right. And then, here's the locations. What you do is you just click on the light in the order they're installed. And you can see right here the numbers, and it's the order of the lights, one to the next. One other thing I'll do, a little trick I do, is once I've got the picture uploaded into the custommodel.com, I'll set up in my shop with my computer, and I'll hook up the wireframe to a controller, and I'll just turn on light number 1. I'll turn on light number 4. I'll make sure as I go down the road that I've captured them all. So I kind of double check myself as I go through it to make sure I get all the lights numbered in the right order. Okay, so you also can create submodels. All right, and so an example here, let's just look at Woody here. So I have a submodel for the hat, for his arms, for his face, his legs, his boots. So you see there that all of the colors of these are individual. And so when it's a submodels in X lights, I can just draw an on effect on there, and I can select the color, and therefore I create in a sequence. I can quickly change the colors as how I want them to be. Rex was relatively easy. He's got his hat, got his brim there, his teeth, eyes, nose, and the rest of his body, most of it's being green. All right, so in the custom modeler program or slash website, you can here's how you do your various submodels. Okay, you create a submodel and you name it. And like here for the left arm as an example here, I specified nodes 34 through 65. All right, and you'll see right here, here's part of it. 34 starts here, 65, so that's the whole arm. And you can do this several ways. You can do a left click and drag your mouse over the area, and it'll automatically drop it into there. You can type in those numbers, or you can just individually select each one of these nodes, and it will automatically load them in on the custom modeler. And all right, let's go on to the next slide. So when you're done creating your submodels, you export the next model. And you just do it right here from the file and you export it. This is a way of getting ready to load that into X-Lights. All right. So now that you know the location of it, the small button right here that says import. Quality of my picture isn't great. And I can import that X model. And this is what it looks like. So you see my you see Woody here, Rex, and they look pretty close to the picture that I showed you earlier. Right here, loaded up in X-Lights. So there you go. Go back to the photo. So it looks really, really close, and you're able to drag this in X-Lights. You'll probably have to size it so it's appropriately sized for your display, so it'll accurately show what's going on in your effects on the house. All right, so now one of the things I added this year, I did this last year, is mounting your wireframe. How do you set it up? Where do you go put it? So you have some options there. And you want to consider, where do you want to put it? You want to put it in your yard, you can put it on your roof, and you also consider your location. And if you get lots of rain, you're going to want to make sure, first of all, your connections are waterproof. But also, is there a chance that if you're staking it in the ground, will it fall over because it gets too wet, or do you want to elevate it because you get a lot of snow? So these are things you need to consider. I have to consider high winds. I do get snow, but not terrible. You see just a light dusting on my roof here right now. All right. So I like to make a tripod arrangement, and you can make them out of steel or PVC. I have a coral prop here mounted with a PVC frame, and I'll put sandbags on the base, and then I'll run a line. I got a cord right here, running up to an eye on my house where I click it in with a carabiner. That eye just stays bolted to the side of my house all year. And so the sand keeps this under tension so it doesn't get blown upward, and it prevents it from rocking side to side, and the cord keeps it from sliding off of the roof. All right, so here's a shot. I had a lift here just before takedown of my show. And here's Santa and the reindeer. And you'll see here that I have the line running up the roof, and I have a sandbag just over the peak. And then I have sandbags here in the back of my steel frame that I built for these to hold it in position. Now, these frames, I just put up every year, and I just zip tie my wireframe to these steel frames. Now, you can build these out of, if you want to build a steel frame, you have several options. You could bolt it, so you don't have to do any welding, or you could weld it together, which is what I did. So again, I guess I've been talking about this already. You'll see the sandbag at the base again and up to the wall, and just a simple carabiner on the end. And you can see my big old granny knot there that I put together. All right, so you don't have to build these tripods. You can actually go and buy parts and systems. 3D printed SFL Designs. They have a system here with a variable angle for your prop, so you can adjust it to your roof or your ground, wherever you want to go put it. And you can use PVC pipe, or I believe they have 3D models that you can use EMT as well. And with this as being the part that goes in the ground and goes up and supports your prop. And then here on the right is one from Matos, which is all made out of steel. Again, it's adjustable in its angle. All right, in the yard, again, I use a tripod. You can just simply use stakes, and some of the wireframes, if you buy them, will come with a piece of rod just going straight down. Okay, and you just push your wireframe down into the ground. And for some people, that'll work really well. For large, I didn't spell heavy right. Heavy wireframes, I'll use a steel tripod and I go stake it in the ground. I'll go into this in a little bit more detail in a second. All right, so here's my caboose. And due to this thing's pretty heavy with the whole P5 panel arrangement on there. So I took a piece of 1x1 angle and I welded a bolt to the side of the frame for the P5 panel. And then I took a bolt and just bolted it in place. And down on the bottom, I put another bolt in a hole, and I took a piece of 1x and I cut an angle on it with my angle grinder so I could just become a stake and jam it in the ground. And this holds it in position really well. All right, so other things you can do, I mean, you can weld. Here's my star for my megatree. I created this wireframe as well. This is one of my very first ones that I did. It was quite interesting. The very first few wire welds I made, first star fell all apart. This is like the third generation that finally stayed together well enough. I had to learn how to weld first. So if you decide if you're an amateur and you've never done welding before, just start practicing. Weld the box. Try and pull it apart once it's cooled off. All right, so yeah, so it's pretty simple. And here I just took a piece of, oops, get back to where I was. All right, I just took a piece of 1/2-inch pipe and I welded it. It's got a threaded end on the end of it, and I use a floor flange to attach it to my topper for my megatree. You could also, put an angle on this and jam it in the ground if you want. And I've welded it just at these points here where the star interfaces or touches the pole. All right, so kind of wrap things up here, and then we can go to questions. Looks like I'm going relatively fast here. Is you can you don't have to be an expert to make your own wireframes. You don't have to be artistic. You get a pattern off the internet. Get 1/4-inch steel from a local steel supplier. Don't go to Home Depot. They come in 20-foot sections, and they cost about the same as a 5-foot section from Home Depot. So just and typically a steel supplier will cut them in half for you. So I have my pickup truck is it's a short bed, and I don't want a 20-foot piece of steel hanging out the back, so I have them cut it in half. If you want them cut them in smaller sections, they typically charge you a little bit for that, but that's typically not an issue for them, so they'll do whatever you want there. Practice your welding, and you'll get better quickly. Just give it a shot. You'll be surprised how proficient you get in a short period of time, especially when you're talking 1/4-inch steel. It's not a very difficult weld to perform. Add your lights and add it to your show. And then you will have to do a custom model and X lights for it. All right, so that is my I'm done sharing or my presentation. I haven't been paying attention to chat here. Is any questions coming through in chat? All right, what do we got here? Yeah, that's Dave, good idea. You could use a small digital projector and not waste all that paper and project it and lay it all out there. That would work really well. So if you guys want to come off mute and you want to ask any questions, feel free. Or how do you treat your steel? Paint primer. I just use Krylon paint. I sand it down with a sanding wheel typically to clean it up, and then I'll paint it. It's not perfect, but it lasts well. Every once in a while, I have to do a little bit of touch-up paint. All right. Okay. Anything else, guys? All right. Looks like we're going to get done relatively quick. Oh, here we go. Well, thank you. All right, guys. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, I'll stay online. If you want to ask questions, feel free to come off mute and ask questions.
I do have another question for you, and I just want to say you've done a really good job presenting this. This has been informational. The orientation of your pixels is, sideways compared to, let's say a standard coral prop where it pokes through the front. Do you find there's a lot of difference in that, or is it, what would you say, better, worse, or is there options there?
Yeah, I think there are options out there. I think some 3D printed parts you can get. I'd have to go look to make sure that you could have it face out. My problem with the clips is they seem to come loose easily right now, but I haven't really noticed too much of an issue. I'll also go through with my show and I'll balance all the lighting. Typically I'll run a lot of my pixels because they have so many like at 30%, but on certain props I might bump it up so it'll look better. Okay, so it kind of balances with the rest of the props in the show. Yeah, so I just basically put those pixels, butt them right up against each other, and I kind of wrap the wires, make it nice and neat. But I really haven't noticed too much of an issue with it being on its side. But I will do adjustments to for each of the outputs, the percent brightness, right? And I'll adjust that as I get ready to start my show for the first time, for the season. And it's locked in for all of I just set that in the controller so it locks it in place.
That makes plenty of sense. Thanks.
Yep. Let's see. What was the address of I'll put that in the chat, lightshowhub.com, I believe. Let me double check. Yeah, I will find that here. Let me go to Safari. Obviously, I just told you I'm on a Mac. I found it. I went over to a Mac. I used PCs for years, but I went over to a Mac for X-Lights because it renders so much faster. Yeah, it's lightshowhub.com. And he's got a Megatree calculator too, is what he's got in there as well. Okay, so there you go. That's I mean, no matter what, if you want to build a custom model, I really prefer it to the X-Lights. I mean, in X-Lights you can import your picture as well, and it puts it in like to an Excel grid, and then you click on each of the lights again, and just the order. It's the same process as you just click through it, and then and now it's built right in X-Lights, your model. That's the advantage. But one of the things I found with the X-Lights one, it's hard to see the whole prop. As you have to make a pretty fine grid, otherwise you're kind of approximating the position of each of the pixels. And if you're using lightshowhub.com, it just puts it exactly where it's at, and when it generates it, it'll generate a good submodel for you. Yeah, so again, I mean, I love coloring, kids coloring pages. They're great for this. All right. Well, guys, well, thanks. You guys have a great day.